All right, so a couple things that I forgot to mention here. So before we can actually do anything, after we import the XML file here, we have to go into our preferences here and remove a couple of these items. So these are the ones: dashboard content, dashboard layout, identity dashboard. So all three of those need to be unchecked, otherwise you'll get a class not found error. So if you forget to do it, when you try to import an artifact into the project from Sailpoint, it's going to try and look up all these objects, and if they don't exist in the identity, then you'll get a class not found. So these are the three that we're erroring out. So you have to get rid of those, uncheck them, and then everything will work. So because what you can do here is you could use the artifact import and it'll pull from Sailpoint into your project here, any existing rule or whatever it is you want. Okay, so that was one thing we have to do. Now we're going to go back here for now. We'll get to this one later. So for here we have our Java code and our XML BeanShell. Okay, so you see here how the source is blanked out. Okay, and we have our attributes that or arguments we're going to be passing in, the context and the log. This is a very generic type BeanShell we're going to do. Okay, so now these things here, okay, this plugin provides these things here that you can use. Okay, so what you want to do here is this is where you define where your XML file is for this code. Okay, so that's where it is here, config rule mytestbeanshell.xml. Okay, and then the XPath is rule source. So when we actually write our code here, the next thing we're going to do is we ignore these attributes that we're using in here that we have defined as arguments, because they're already defined by the rule engine, so we don't really need to have them defined in our code. So when this plugin goes to build the rule, it's going to take these things out. Anything that's in the artifact ignore is going to come out. Okay, and the other thing I do is I usually use the full class name or the full package name so that I don't have an error up here with an import that's not being used. So when this comes out, the whole thing comes out. All right, the next thing is your artifact body. This is where you define your execute or your main. Okay, so you could go down here and put in as many methods as you want. You don't necessarily need to pass anything unless you want to. So like, for example, if this method needs the context, it already has it. But if you generated something here that you want to pass in, you can certainly do that. Okay, so let's do public void method 2. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now when we hit save, you'll notice this plugin has this little button up here. So when we click the button, it's going to update the XML file and it's going to create this code in there for us. So let's see what it did. Okay, so it's putting in the C data so we don't have to worry about escaping all the less than, equal to stuff. All right, so here we have our logger that we created. Okay, now notice how the methods are defined first, and then our execute method has been completely removed, and it'll be replaced by any code that's wrapped in our execute method. So in our case, it's just the logger.error. Okay, so that's how you set these up. So it makes the code very readable. Okay, and then over here from the XML side of things, you can right click and do a deploy artifact. And we got a timeout. Okay, so we got to see if we can fix that. All right, I'll take a look at the timeout values, but essentially this is how this plugin here works. Now what I usually do is if there's already code deployed that you want to modify, I'll usually just use this one and check it out of Sailpoint and make my changes here. This actually can work as a decent editor. Not great, not as good as doing it this way, but it is better than just coding a BeanShell in Notepad. All right, so I'm going to finish this one up and we'll come back and do another one on fixing that timeout.